I've been never done this. I've been here 6 years. It never happened before, and probably won't happen again. But we were gone 3 Sundays in a row, and the main reason for that was Valori and I, and she's here somewhere, working probably. Where is she? All right, she's in the back, way in the back. All right, so a little over 3 weeks ago on a Saturday morning, we headed down to O'Hare Airport. And by the way, I want to give a little shout out before I get into the things tonight. There is a ministry here for individuals that are going either on the mission field or on a ministry trip called One Call, That's All. And I've heard that, yeah. There's some guy on TV that keeps using our theme, and one call, that's all. Larry Nitch started this some years back, and our missionaries that come in here, he makes sure that they get picked up, and there's several other individuals that work with Larry to make that happen. But Larry picked us up, got us to O'Hare Airport, which is a bit of a trek, and that's how our day started. Well, you start the trek down to Israel, and it took us about 24 hours to literally get to Tel Aviv. We had a layover in Europe, which is pretty standard, several hours, then you end up in Tel Aviv. And as usual, I've been to Israel now about a dozen times. I do tour guide work in Israel as well, and everything is facial recognition, by the way. And I went through the passport line in Tel Aviv, and as usual, I was rejected. And it's like only a face Mama could love, and they're like, we don't want that one here. And bottom line, Valori got lickety-split right through the line. I ended up going through their secondary screening. They took another shot of my face and said, all right, we'll let you in. They never tell you why. It happens to me almost every time I go. I don't know if it's because of my former law enforcement career or because of maybe some things I will say about things through Prophecy Focus Global Update or the radio or the TV or who knows what. Oh, by the way, quick commercial. Tomorrow night, 7 o'clock p.m., I'll be on In Focus with Jim Snyder. That's TV 30 if you want to watch that, 7 o'clock tomorrow night. Then I'll be on BCY America with Jim Snyder on Crosstalk on Tuesday at 2 p.m. And every place around the country we go, people get Crosstalk, so they'll hear us on that. Also Saturday at 1:30 p.m., every single Saturday, 1:30, we have a show called Prophecy Unfolding. And then if you look in your bulletin, we have a TV program called Prophecy Focus, and that airs about 4 times a week. So we try to keep busy. That's not a hard thing to do. So between the church and radio and TV, we keep things going. All right, let's get back to Israel. So bottom line, we ended up getting through Tel Aviv. And again, the jet lag and all that, you try to do the best you can and get the tour going. So we were with Faith Baptist Bible College out of Ankeny, Iowa this time. We were actually paying customers, which is unusual. He did have us teach once in Jerusalem, so I got to do a little teaching with the folks. But what we're going to do tonight is basically go through the sites that we went through. I want to say this, and again, I have never, ever made one dime off of doing tours in Israel. I'm not trying to sell tours. If you decide you want to go, that's totally up to you. I am really thinking, though, I've been on a drought. It's been about 6 years since I'd gone to Israel, mainly because COVID kicked in, shut everything down. Then the war kicked in 2023 with Hamas attacking Israel. So it's really been, there's only been a handful of tours, really, across the country and across the world that have been going into Israel. So we took... I hate to say we took a chance because that doesn't sound very spiritual, but we took a chance and signed on at the last minute to go with Faith Baptist Bible College, about 48 other folks. We did a couple of days in Greece, went to Corinth and to Athens. I'm going to leave that alone for another day. I'm going to center on Israel tonight. But the bottom line is we went with that group, and it really was spectacular. The bottom line is people always ask, were you nervous? Were you scared? Was there any conflicts? The answer is the same answer I've given every time I've gone. No issues whatsoever. So I could play it up and say, oh, we were on the edge and it was tense and, we were scared to death at the bombs. No, folks, it's never been like that. It's probably, you go through Israel the same way you drive through Union Grove. It's about the same amount of police that are there instead of sheriff's deputies. I mean, they're all over the place, but it's very safe overall. Now, of course, I very much knew, because I watch news feeds from Israel every single day. Several of them, I know exactly what's taking place. There's a couple of folks that get extremely good intelligence and put it out there. So I very much knew, and of course I'm listening to the president every day in his speeches, and very much knew that, it was a matter of a day or two before the conflict would start with Iran. So we got back Wednesday night, late night, and we go through Thursday, Friday, all of a sudden early Saturday morning. Of course, they're 8 hours ahead compared to our time. The bombs began to fall during daylight hours from Israel and from the United States into Iran. Game on. We knew as soon as that happened that the missiles and the bombs would start to fly from Iran into Israel. So hundreds and hundreds of missiles were sent, and drones were sent into Israel from Iran. There's just a couple that managed to get through what's known as the Iron Dome and strike a couple of sites in Israel. Basically, when you think of war and you look at what happened back from the 23rd back in 2023 when Hamas came into Israel, how many fighter jets from Israel got shot down? Let me see, I think it was 0, except maybe a friendly fire incident. How many folks died in Israel? A handful. Now again, one death is one too many, but you look at the casualties from what Israel's been doing, fighting the Houthis in Yemen, fighting Hamas in Gaza, fighting Hezbollah up north from Lebanon, from Iran and so forth, and when the United States went in several months ago and of course took out the main nuclear plants. So, it's just amazing. The casualties have been so minimal. When you think about Iran, we have been told ever since I've been a little boy, look out for Iran. Don't mess with Iran. They're a superpower. You start to mess with them and you're going to have serious problems. No other president outside of the current president's been willing to take that chance. Didn't know what kind of firepower they had. The intelligence wasn't extremely good, apparently, and there's enough saber rattling out there. It's like, don't mess with Iran. Well, again, we're going to get into Israel in a moment, but just to set the stage for what took place just a little over a week ago, why did all that happen? Well, again, and we talked a little bit about it this morning. We'll talk a lot about it on the radio and TV next week. What took place? Well, we now know that President Trump and Prime Minister of Israel, Netanyahu, had been discussing the issues with Iran and the rebuilding of the nuclear program and the enrichment of uranium. They both decided, and this was way predetermined. By the way, if you're in law enforcement or if you're in government and you're going to go after something that's bad, do you tell everyone your plans before you do it? Well, if you do, you're a let's see, what's the nicest word I can use? You're a knucklehead. It's just dumb. And you do not tell the enemy what you're going to do to attack them. Now, President Trump had put out signals that something's going to take place, but he didn't tell them what his plan was. These plans, by the way, had been developed, of course. You don't go in and do what America and Israel did without having a very strategic plan. How did they get in and out of there without losing jets? And how did they get in and out with minimal casualties, if you will, to the drones and so forth? They knew where their surveillance systems were. They knew where the anti-ballistic missile systems were. And they just went in there and wreaked havoc on Iran. So folks, again, some of you watch this stuff just like I do. Some of you, this is like brand new material. But the bottom line is, Iran, what they're shooting now at Israel is less than 10% of what they started with over just a week ago. So, I mean, they are neutralizing them big time. President Trump has now made the statement to a couple of other countries that want to join on. And he's like, don't flatter us with you wanting to join us now. We've already won the war. We don't want you to join. That's a pretty bold statement. He's already claimed victory over Iran. And the other thing that you're seeing is the unrest between Iran and other Muslim countries, better known as what they'll call the Gulf states, the Gulf empires. They're all Muslim. Why are they fighting about, it's about 8 other different countries right now? Well, there's 2 major sects, if you will, or groups within the Muslim world. One is called Shiite or Shia, and the other one's called Sunni. This is within the Muslim world. They have a major conflict between these 2 groups. Now, that's part of the equation. If you go a little bit under the radar, so to speak, and you find out about the economic issues between some of these countries, like the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Qatar, Kuwait, and why in the world is Iran bombing what should be their allies? Well, there's the Shia-Sunni rub. There's different things with millions and billions of dollars. There's millions of dollars associated with the oil and so forth that is transported. So some things appear to be, well, they're just fighting to fight because, no, nobody fights just to fight. There's serious issues economically. There's serious issues religion-wise. What's the difference between the Muslim world and the Christian world? We may not agree with other groups. We may have different theology. Even among true born-again believing Christians, there may be differing of theology, but we're not going to go to war over it. We're not going to, well, maybe, I guess on occasion there might have been a fist fight or two, but there shouldn't be. Bottom line, I'm just being facetious. You don't fight each other because you disagree on a theological issue. The Muslims are so sold on what they believe in that they're willing to kill over it. Totally different than you and I from our perspective in Christianity. So there's these huge religious issues that they literally are willing to die for. The only thing that a Christian should be willing to die for is to share their faith with others. In other words, if you're in a particular place, whether it be in another country, and you're proclaiming the gospel of Jesus Christ, if somebody said either recant your faith in Jesus or die, probably a good portion of God's people would say, I'm not recanting my faith, and they'd suffer martyrdom, so to speak. So the Muslims are happy to die. You know why? For the Muslims, death, martyrdom, is the only guaranteed way to get to what they call heaven. Eternity with Allah, so to speak. Mothers, and you'll see this, and then we're going to get into the slides, mothers of Muslim children, if you watch some of the internet feeds, maybe you've done that, and you'll see Mama get on the camera, she'll be speaking Arabic, and she'll talk about her children. And she will talk about her sons especially and say, you know, I wish my sons will grow up and be martyred for Allah. And you're like, what? That's mom saying she hopes her child, she's just looking at these little boys. And she's like, I hope they grow up and are martyred for their faith. Why would a mama say that? Because mama knows, according to the Quran and according to the teachings of Islam, the only way that mom has a good chance of making it to an eternity with Allah is if her sons or son are martyred. So in other words, mama says, please son, go out there and give your life for Allah. Do jihad. Go out there and push Sharia law and die for your faith. Become a martyr, because that's the only hope that I have to spend eternity in a good place. That's a whole lot different than the gospel, isn't it? where Jesus Christ came down from heaven, died on the cross for moms, for dads, for children, and anyone, mom, dad, children, that'll put their faith in Christ can spend eternity with him. All right, we're going to cut at this point. I'm probably going to take the rest of the time just to get through some of the slides. And basically, you get off the plane in Tel Aviv, which is a major city, just like if you were downtown Milwaukee or in another nice area, so to speak, with a lot of modern-day buildings. Tel Aviv is a bit more modern than Milwaukee. Maybe if you go to the upper echelon of Chicago, a little bit more like that. It's a little more upscale because most of it is new. They're building like crazy in there. We talked about this morning the tremendous growth of the Israeli population or the Jewish population in Israel, and it is expanding. All right, so the first thing they want to do when they take you on tour, and pretty much every tour company, every tour guide is going to do the same thing. There is a handful of very important archaeological sites that you're going to go through. They always start, for whatever reason, taking you into the country settings, and then you end up, if you will, in Jerusalem, which is a very very highly populated area with a lot of older facilities, and it's you got to be a little more careful in Jerusalem. But at the beginning, it's like you're on vacation. Seriously, the spots that you go through, they're beautiful. They're much more scenic. They're very country in nature. A lot of open land, and it's fun. It's really a pleasant way to start. All right, what you're looking at here is Caesarea Philippi. Caesarea Philippi. There's two Caesareas that are mainly pointed out in the scriptures. I'm sorry, I said Philippi, I believe. This is Caesarea Maritime, so I gave you the second one first. This is Caesarea Maritime. This is where Herod had his palace and where multiple biblical events took place. Now, I cannot, even though I'd love to, spend the time to go through all of the different things biblically that happen in each of these areas we're going to look at, but I'm just going to be due to time, or I'm trying to be out at a reasonable time, around 7. If I went through all the biblical scenarios, we'd be here for a week. So here's some of the things that happened in Caesarea. Herod the Great built the city of Caesarea between 22 and 10 BC and named it in honor of Caesar Augustus. Caesarea, the Roman capital of Palestine, is an 8,000-acre site which is located 23 miles south of Mount Carmel on the coast and north of Tel Aviv of the Mediterranean Sea. So the water you see there is the Mediterranean Sea. That was the port off the Mediterranean Sea where Herod had one of his many palaces. The reason that that we start here on every tour is you'll see some of the ancient sites, and we'll have some more pictures in a moment we're going to look at. All right, so what else happened? 3 Roman governors of Palestine lived there: Felix, Acts 24, Festus, Acts 25, and Pontius Pilate from John 19. Archaeologists found Pilate's name carved in stone in the theater in Caesarea. In New Testament times, Caesarea served as the major seaport of Judea. Herod built a harbor that could shelter ships from Mediterranean storms. Since 1971, excavations have added much information about Caesarea. A very productive aqueduct, which we'll show you in a moment, was built by King Herod, which brought fresh water from Mount Carmel to Caesarea. It's an engineering marvel. All right, so this is the theater that was built at Caesarea Maritime. Again, Herod, he was about entertainment, he was about luxury, and this is the theater that he had built in that place. The lower section is original, the upper section has been redone, and they actually still have concerts there at this particular venue. All right, here's the part of the aqueduct. So you can see the Mediterranean Sea in the background, but the Mediterranean Sea is not drinkable water. It has to be desalinated. So they built this massive aqueduct. Now, obviously, it's not in good shape today, but this goes for miles. That water is basically taken from a spring, and that water was run on the top of that big giant edifice, and they had to get just a very, very slight incline in order to get that water from miles northeast all the way down to Caesarea. It truly was an engineering marvel back during the first century times. All right, so you come out of Caesarea Maritime, and we did not actually get completely to this site, but I'm going to show you a couple of pictures I've taken in the past. The next site that we want to go to is called Mount Carmel, which is north of Caesarea Maritime. The reason I love this picture, I'm standing on the top of Mount Carmel, and you're looking out across a vast valley. First time I went there, I was standing up on this platform, not facing out towards that field, but facing the opposite direction. And you come up those stairs, you get on the platform, and I'm looking out, nothing big deal. I turned around and saw that picture. Miles and miles and miles of open field surrounded by mountains. Do you know what that field is? It is the battle, kind of gave it away. It's the battlefield of Armageddon. That's where Zechariah chapter 14 reminds us that all nations, when Jesus Christ returns, not at the rapture, but at his second coming, all nations will gather in that battlefield, and they will all be struck down by the Lord Jesus. Did you not turn your cell phones off? That was just a reminder. Anyway, nope, shame on me, I forgot. All right. Whoever called, if you're watching, sorry. All right. We'll catch up later. Folks, this is, I mean, it is, I shed a few tears the first time I saw this. It was just so awe-inspiring to see. This is the place. How many times have we talked about Armageddon, which is found one time? The only time the word Armageddon is used is Revelation 16, verse 16, but many, many different passages talk about that battle that will take place there. It will be filled with all nations that will gather together at the end of the 7-year tribulation period, and the blood will rise to what level? As high as a horse's bridle, Revelation 14. All of those mountains, by the way, which you can't see, and it's usually hazy there, so it is hard to see. We talked about Gog Magog this morning, surrounded by mountains. When all of those Islamic nations rise up in Ezekiel 38 and 39, they will come up over those mountains. They will begin to attack Israel. By the way, what happens to all those nations? God wipes them out with fire and brimstone and kills them. So it's an amazing thing. So that basically... folks, this is worth the price of the ticket to go to Israel. It truly is. It's just absolutely amazing to see that, and especially if you enjoy prophecy. All right, let's get back on the bus. We start taking a little bit of a trek, and most of the bus drivers like to go by this particular spot. These are ancient tombs. And you see actually the stone, the rollaway stone is still sitting there. So when people died, they would take their bodies and they would put them in a sepulcher inside or a sarcophagus. They're basically a big giant tomb or a big giant box at times that they'd put the body in. After the body decayed, they didn't leave the body in there. They usually took the body out because you can imagine how much work it is to build those tombs. They would take the body out after it was totally decomposed, and they would take it out of the big sarcophagus or out of the big tomb, and they would put it in a little box called an ossuary. Just looks like a little tiny casket, if you will, made out of stone. So they would take the bones, gently, if you will, fold them up, put them in the ossuary, and then put whoever the person is in a sacred spot for them. But these are literal tombs that exist in Israel, and someone found them, and I don't know who it was, but it truly reminds us. By the way, was Jesus put into a tomb? Absolutely, and we'll show what's known as the garden tomb at the end of the slide presentation. All right, one of the most beautiful spots on earth is known as the Sea of Galilee, or the Sea of Tiberias, same place, or also known as Lake Gennesaret, so it has three main names. We are on this particular picture is on the north side of the Sea of Galilee. Now I'm going to go off camera for a moment. If you see right here, there's a couple of buildings. Obviously, it's very hard to see on that big screen. That is Capernaum, which is on the northern side of the Sea of Galilee. Capernaum, by the way, is where Jesus did a major part of his earthly ministry, ministering at that particular spot. So bottom line is, I just took this particular trip. I don't want to tell you this, but most of the hotels you stay in, they're about, from an American standard, maybe about a 3-star. This hotel that we're in is called David's Heart. It's a 5-star plus. And how in the world they got that booked for us is beyond me. I think it's because it's only 2 years old, and based on nobody showing up in Israel, we're very fortunate. So it's an absolutely gorgeous place. The food, I'm not kidding. If you took that whole section of our auditorium filled with food for breakfast and dinner, I mean just filled, you name it, they got it. Mostly Israeli food. By the way, Israeli food is not as savory as our, believe it or not. It's a little more bland. They realize most tourists are Americans, so they've just recently started using a little bit of sugar in their desserts. So, I mean, wow, you can eat and eat and eat. Bottom line, though, we're looking out my window of the hotel room, and that's the site. Surrounded by the Sea of Galilee and so many things that have taken place on that site. Also at the Sea of Galilee is what's called the Jesus Boat Museum, or the Sea of Galilee Museum. Now inside there, and this particular time it was actually shut down, it just became under new ownership. There literally is a 1st century fishing boat that's inside there. I did not bring a picture of that, but it's inside this museum, and of course you got to pay to see it. That, though, is not the highlight. The highlight is everybody that comes to Israel gets on one of these boats. There's 3 boats, faith, love, and hope. The owner is a Messianic Christian, and the entire time he takes you out a little ways into the Sea of Galilee, and he's a singer, so he sings his music, and it's basically a worship time on the boat for about a half an hour as you just kind of go out onto the Sea of Galilee and enjoy it. So, again, if by chance you ever manage to get there, you can almost guarantee, unless something for whatever reason happens, that you get to go on one of these boats and enjoy the Sea of Galilee. By the way, the Sea of Galilee is the fresh water that's supplied to most of the people in Israel. Only up until the last couple of years have they had desalination plants, which basically take the salt water from the Mediterranean Sea, it cleans it up, and it gets it to the people. Water is a very, very precious commodity in Israel. So when you have the Palestinian side of things as well as the Jewish side of things, or if you call the East Bank or the West Bank, how many have heard the term West Bank, right? West Bank basically refers to Judea and Samaria, which is God's property, but the Palestinian side of things, the Jewish people basically, if you go in there, you're taking your life into your hands. There's big giant red signs about the size of the screen, except facing the different direction. And if you have Jewish plates on your car and you attempt to drive into the Palestinian side of things, or if you will, into the quote-unquote West Bank, it's a good probability you aren't coming out. And you mean, what? Well, they're going to keep you and wine you and dine you? No, they're going to kill you. I mean, it's just that simple. So they make it clear, so you don't want to do that. All right, so here's the Sea of Galilee. Well, let's just walk down that bank, and you go to a place called Capernaum. Capernaum is an archaeological site today, and this is where Jesus performed much of his ministry during the last 3 years of his time on earth. Now again, when you're talking about archaeology, you're going to be looking at stones and formations, And to some, it's like, well, that's boring. Well, to those of us that love it, it's not boring. It's exciting to see what took place during the first century when Jesus was literally here on the earth. So all of these things that you see, they put them on display, obviously. They were part of the buildings that existed when Jesus was here on earth. And again, it's like, well, that's columns and they're headers and so forth in different pieces of the buildings. But it's just amazing that they're still preserved and have been brought up from archaeological digs. Here's the most important picture probably of the night. And you're like, well, what is that? That is the synagogue in Capernaum. I'm going to walk off camera again. You see the different colors here and the different layers in that synagogue. Do you remember that Jesus preached in the synagogue in Capernaum? If you look down at that bottom layer, that is the first layer of that particular synagogue, which would have been the particular layer or the particular foundation that would have been the foundation for when that synagogue stood when Jesus walked in there and taught. So what's up there now came about in the Byzantine era, which is quite a bit later, but and that's what that little sign there, it basically talks about the various levels. So you can walk up onto the platform and imagine, obviously it's different than it would have been when Jesus was here, but that is the foundation of the exact synagogue where Jesus would have taught in Capernaum. When you walk down just a few feet, you come up to this particular bank of the Sea of Galilee. So Capernaum was right off the sea. We know multiple different biblical accounts when Jesus would get into his boat. He would travel to different places on the Sea of Galilee. One thing I'm going to point out, which most tour guides don't, and many of them don't know about. All right, I'm going to go off camera again. You see what looks like a mountain up there? That is known as Mount Arbel. That also has biblical significance. You remember when Jesus, first of all, when Jesus was walking on the water on the Sea of Galilee? It talked about the seas were extremely rough. Now, if you look at it, it's as calm as can be right now. But here's what happens. There are Mount Arbel, there's a little bit of a dip, and then it goes back up. And it forms a vortex. When the wind begins to blow between Mount Arbel and the next little mountain to the side of it, those winds kick up. We were there one afternoon about 3 p.m., which is the time when the winds normally pick up there. And all of a sudden, that beautiful calm sea becomes a raging sea with waves and so forth. Let me see. Remember when Peter stepped out of the boat? Or Jesus was out of the boat, and Peter said, "Can I come to you, Jesus?" And he's like, "Of course, come on out here, walk on the water." Peter began to walk on the water. The waves came up, scared the living fire out of him. What happened to Peter? He doubted, he began to sink, and he said, "What? Lord, save me." And Jesus reached out his hand, grabbed him, and of course they walked back into the boat. So this is the area exactly where that happened. All right, so we leave this beautiful spot, again known as Capernaum, where Jesus did many different things. By the way, and I didn't put a picture up. Folks, I'm going to be straightforward. Because of the 2 weeks of travel in Israel, because of the week at Bibleville, we've been going day and night. And I wanted to add a few more things to this, so we'll have to do a follow-up later with some of the things I couldn't get to. I was supposed to be back in town yesterday by 5 p.m. We didn't get into almost 10 o'clock last night and had to get things ready for, finish things for today. So there's a lot of pictures I wish I could show you, but not going to happen tonight. All right, next place you go is you go up a little bit further north to a place called Nazareth. I talk about that this morning. It's called Nazareth Village. It's actually was formed by the YMCA. It's a first century mock-up of what things would have been like when Jesus was here on earth. So they take you on a little tour through this little section, a little piece of land, and they have people that are dressed up like first century. So you can see the contrast. We got some normal-looking folks for our generation here. You got the sheep and, of course, the herders and so forth. And they put on a nice presentation, what it would have been like in the first century. I love this picture. I took this a couple of years ago, but I threw it in here for tonight. I'm standing in Nazareth Village. Did Jesus spend time in Nazareth? Absolutely he did. Of course, all of the buildings that you see there wouldn't have been there at that time. But up on the top of that hill where the Nazareth Village is, if you look straight ahead and you look through that V that you see there, you see that background where there's no buildings. Do you know what that is? That is another picture of the Valley of Armageddon. The Lord Jesus, living in Nazareth, was able to look out and see that valley. Well, Jesus, of course, knew that someday in the future, he'll be coming back, and that's the exact place where Armageddon will take place and the nations will be wiped out. So you literally can see it from that spot. All right, we're going to leave Nazareth. We're going to go down past Cana of Galilee. There's really no sights in Cana. There's a big giant church basilica like there is in every quote-unquote holy spot in Israel, but there is no remains there from Cana. What happened in Cana? The first what? First miracle, all right, that Jesus performed. So this is more what the streets look like now. How would you like to drive a big giant tour bus through these streets? It is absolutely amazing, and every time we've gone there, I mean, it's like, and they're big. I mean, they're big giant tour buses, and these guys somehow maneuver through these streets without smashing cars or anyone, and it's quite amazing. But it literally is that tight, and they get through them, and I mean, that's a miracle. All right, we're going to go down now, a little bit south, and we're going to come to a place called Gideon Springs. Remember what happened with Gideon. God has basically, Gideon wants to determine how many people should be involved in the battle against the pagans that were in that area. And God said, listen, I want, if they drink the water a certain way, I only want a handful of people to go out and to fight. Why did God only want a handful of people to fight the enemy? Because God wants to be God. God wants to make it sure that people understand that he's in charge, that he's the one that gives the victory, and not by our might, but by his might. So you come down, and this is believed to be the original site where Gideon Springs is from. It's a major tour site. The people come, you look at it, of course, take your pictures, and you move on. Now you move a little bit further south, and you go to probably one of the best archaeological parks that exists in Israel, called Bet Shan. Let's see, I recognize that young lady. Bet Shan National Park. This is a major archaeological site known as Bet Shan. I'm going to turn to I got to find my place here in Bet Shan, and I want to read you a little excerpt about this. It's how many of you ever heard of Bet Shan before? All right, some. It is a major biblical site from the Old Testament. And I got to find my place here. All right, got it. All right. Here's a little excerpt about Bet Shan. The town of Bet Shan is located 15 miles south of the Sea of Galilee and 4 miles west of the River Jordan. It stood at the eastern end of the Jezreel Valley, also known as the Megiddo and Armageddon and so forth, guarding an important Jordan River crossing. It was one of the key cities that developed at points where natural routes connected the highlands to the east and west. When the Philistines defeated Israel under King Saul at the battle on Mount Gilboa, Bet Shan was a Philistine city. So folks, this is a pagan city that we're going to be examining here. Let's get up to one of the archaeological pictures. The slain bodies of Saul and his sons were hung on the city wall. So this is a major biblical site based on what happened to Saul and his sons. Saul's head was displayed in the temple of Dagon, a Philistine deity. And of course, that's found in 1st and 2nd Samuel and 1st Chronicles. Later, the city became a part of David's kingdom. Bet-Shan contains the ancient tell, meaning a big giant hill, under which there are remains. If you look in the background, you see that green hill? That is a tell, meaning that if you dig out a tell, there's going to be a city underneath it. Over the years and the millennia, they get covered up with dirt, and it's amazing how these tells form. But over a couple thousand years, they get covered up. So those ancient cities disappear in the dirt. So when you look at archaeological remains, you just don't walk in 2,000 years later and see what you're going to see here. All this stuff has to be unearthed. All right, so Bet-Shan contains the ancient tell, or basically giant hill covered up with dirt, from the Old Testament, which towers above the city of Scythopolis. 2 Egyptian tests found at Tel El Hun, a mound, indicate that this is the same area as Bet-Shan. The tell, or mound, is 213 feet high and about 1.5 miles in circumference at its base. The area that included Bet-Shan was given to Issachar's tribe at the time of Israel's conquest of Canaan. Eventually, Manasseh's tribe took it over, Joshua 17. It was then added into the district of Bana under King Solomon in 1 Kings 4, verse 12. All right, so what is the major historical significance of Bet-Shan? Well, when Saul was killed, his sons were killed. They literally cut their heads off. They put them on the city walls, and God's people came, rescued, if you will, their bodies, and buried them properly. By the way, it's very interesting in Jewish culture. If you watched what took place with the Hamas versus Israel, 250 hostages were taken. Many of them died in Gaza. What was the big deal about recovering the bodies from Gaza and bringing them back home? Well, here's the big deal. The Jewish people very, very strongly believe that when one of their relatives or one of their loved ones dies, that they need to be brought back to Israel and given a proper burial. It's a very, very strong position with the Jewish people. So if you watched what happened when President Trump said, yeah, we're going to go in there, we're going to make a deal with Hamas, and somehow we're going to get all of the hostages, dead and alive, back. That was major with the Jewish people. And did they get accomplished? It absolutely did. So the dead and alive bodies were brought back. All right, just a couple of pictures of what is in Bet-Shan today. Again, one of the major archaeological sites. You can see where some of the foundations are. You can see a bit of a coliseum in the back of this one. This is what would be called basically a Roman-style bathhouse. You say, well, how do you take a bath in that? Well, that's basically the bottom floor. So you put water vapors through that, you get it heated up, and basically those, if you will, those protruding things, they had platforms on them, like a floor, and the water vapor would rise up, and basically those were the baths, if you will, that the folks would go to and enjoy. So you can see that's a raised platform. Obviously, that metal platform is what we walked through to be able to see what was below. But that was a major form of entertainment for the people back before the first century, back in BC times. These mosaic floors are original, back from ancient times, and they've been uncovered, cleaned up the best they can, and they are tiny. I mean, they're like 1-inch square little tiles, and they still exist there today. Here is the colonnade, if you will, the main street that the people would have walked down. And, of course, you see the tell in the background where the city, part of that city is still under dirt, another part of it. So you see how massive this place was. One more shot. All right, I didn't do it this time because my knees basically are saying you're not climbing hills and small mountains or tells anymore. But about 6 years ago, Valori and I made it to the top of that tell, and here's the picture looking down. So when you look at it, we're up on that tell, several hundred feet in the air. You look down, you can see the massive archaeological uncoveries. By the way, if you see these pillars that are down. There are massive earthquakes that come through Israel, and those pillars, that's the exact position they were found when they were uncovered. So you see some were left standing, many of them went down due to the earthquake. So there are major earthquakes in Israel. And when you look at this, this is some of those that fell down presumably during one of the earthquakes. And these are big pillars, by the way, even though you can't tell based on the picture. Again, Colosseums, urban areas, you got to have some fun. And these Colosseums existed, and there is the picture of that. All right, we're going to leave Bet Shan. We're going to go further south, and we're going to go to a place that, for the most part, we haven't been able to get into until probably the last 6-7 years, which is a place called Jericho. Jericho, which is, if you are down at the Dead Sea and you're going to begin your ascent up to Jerusalem, right at the base of, if you will, the mountains that start to get you up towards Jerusalem, is this place called Jericho. It is run by the Islamic people. It's run by the Muslims. And up until, again, about 6 years ago, you didn't bring tour buses in there because the threat was you bring a tour bus in, you may not come out. But they decided there's something better than rules and regulations keeping tour buses out. They found out there's money on that tour bus. And now all of a sudden, it's like, come on down, come into Jericho, and we're highly welcome now. They've decided, you know, those tourists have a lot of money and they like to spend it, so you're welcome here. What's interesting, if you can see that sign, the black sign there, it says Mount of Temptation. Now, we can't prove exactly where that is, but Jericho, even though it is a Muslim place, they like to believe that that particular mountain is where Jesus was tempted. That's highly suspect, by the way. Most scholars believe it was Mount Hermon, which is to the north of Israel, where that took place, the tallest mountain in Israel. But Jericho is holding their peace, saying that is the Mount of Transfiguration, or I'm sorry, of temptation. All right, so it is a very pretty place. Obviously, you see some folks sitting out there enjoying the beautiful scenery, and it's kind of a nice place to break for a few minutes and look at that. Well, of course, the reason we were able to come in there is because of this particular shop. And you show up there. How many remember Doc Tillotson? So the day we're going into Jericho, just kind of a funny story, he's got a pair of Nikes or gym shoes in the front of the bus, and they're size 17. What in the world is he doing with a size 17 set of shoes? So, of course, everybody, including myself, was like, what are you doing with those shoes? Well, one of the owners of that particular shop, he's a big guy, makes me look small, and he wears a size 17 shoe, and it's very hard to get sneakers in Israel. So Doc Tillotson brought him that pair of size 17, and I mean, it was like that guy got $1 million. He was just thrilled to death to get those shoes. All right, if you look off to the right, you see our tour bus. If you look in the middle of the picture, what do you see? There's a camel. That's Camels Alive, by the way. So it doesn't look like it there, just kind of something. But, of course, you want to ride the camel? Show me the money. So if you want to take a ride on the camel, you give them whatever the amount was, and they get you up on the camel. And, of course, everybody has a big time. Several of the tourists that were on our bus jumped up on the camel, got their pictures, and that's a big deal. And it is a big deal. You don't do that here at home. All right, so that was Jericho. By the way, there is a museum there, an archaeological park in Jericho. It's never been open when I've been there. Apparently there's some ruins there, but nothing apparently to write home about. All right, we got to hurry up. Now we're going to go. There's two major baptismal sites on the Jordan River. The Qasar El Yahud baptismal site is kind of the secondary one. There's another one called Yardenit, which is much more fancy, and I baptized quite a few people there. Last time I was at this side, David Jeremiah was there, and I think he had 7 or 8 buses with him, massive tour group. Of course, not that in the whole country. I don't know that there were 7 tour buses when we were there. So bottom line, you go into the back, and that is the Jordan River. Across the way you see another platform, that actually is Jordan. In other words, if you wanted to cross countries and take your life into your hands and go across the Jordan River, you can go into Jordan, but of course there's soldiers waiting on the other side to give you a nice greeting, so we each keep on our own side. The bottom line is these are baptismal sites, and it is wonderful, and with all seriousness, people that want to get baptized in the Jordan River, you can see a little bit of an inlet there. We'll take people down into the water that want to be baptized in the Jordan and do that, and it really is a wonderful experience for those that take advantage of that. All right, we're going to leave the Jordan River now, which is basically, if you go north, you're going to go into Jerusalem. If you go a little bit south, yet you're going to run into the Dead Sea. The Dead Sea is called the Dead Sea because it's 8 times more higher alkaline than any ocean in the world. This is like the only vessel, there's maybe 1 or 2 others that can go into the Dead Sea. Again, why? Because you start to run that water through your engine, it will last a few seconds and you can kiss it bye-bye. So this has to be very, very special vessels that are specially made to go onto the Dead Sea. So we're staying in another nice hotel looking down to the Dead Sea. What do tourists do at the Dead Sea? You float. So you put on your bathing suits, you walk down to where you see those palm trees, you walk in a couple of feet, and you sit down and you're floating. Now, I'm a big guy. I'm in about 2 feet of water or less, and I sit down and I'm literally sitting in the water, not touching anything. My gluteus maximus, as big as it is held up. And it really is amazing, the buoyancy that takes effect there. So again, you can't put your face in it. You got to be very, very careful because it will burn your eyeballs out. But again, God makes it very clear that in the future, the Dead Sea will be revived. It will live again. The Bible tells us when the millennial temple is built that water will flow out from it towards the great sea, and the waters will be healed. I heard a couple people say it, and that's that Dead Sea will become a place of fish, and people will be fishing there, they'll be swimming there, and so forth. So God will heal that water during the millennial kingdom. All right, many of you have heard of a place called Masada. There's 3 main things that you go to off of the Dead Sea. And again, it's just wonderful to be there. Masada, En-Gedi, and Qumran. All 3 of those are right off of the Dead Sea. If you'll remember Masada, that is where a group of Jews went up this mountain. Now this, and you can barely see it because the coloring is right. If you look right down here, these are cable cars that are coming up Masada. Now some people will walk up it. You can walk up it. There's basically a path you can take. I chose not to take the path. I enjoyed the cable car, and as did my wife. So bottom line, the cable car takes you up 1,300 feet. That was one of the best statistics I got. And you say, well, why is that? Where is the Dead Sea when it comes to sea level? It is the lowest place on earth, 1,350 feet below sea level. And I found out from our tour guide, Aaron, that Masada is 1,300 feet up, which means the top of Masada is basically sea level. I got a big kick out of that. It's like, so that makes sense. So when you're up on the top and you're looking down, if we were at sea level, literally the water would be as high as the top of Masada. All right, what was up on Masada? Again, a bunch of Jewish people got together. They went up on that top area and were eventually killed by the Romans. In fact, strike that. They committed suicide because the Romans kept trying to come up that big giant hill, and basically that's a replica in a much smaller form. So the Romans built siege ramps and so forth to get from here up to the top. Once the Romans had gotten to that point, All of the people up there, except for one lady and 2 children, committed suicide because they we would rather die than become the slaves of the Romans. So it's a major site. More than that, though, Masada was another place that Herod built a castle for himself. So, I mean, it truly is an engineering marvel. So he had different levels of his castle, and of course up on top was the city, but these were all luxurious places that were built for Herod. There is no documentation that he ever even went to it, but he had it built. Herod was a master builder. Just a little bit of a picture of that. Here's the top of, again, Masada looking down. This is what's left of some of the archaeological remains at the top of Masada. So again, it just looks like a bunch of stones thrown together, but it was a city at one time. So again, that's what something looked like, the different levels of it when Herod had built it. And again, just more of the platform on the top of the mountain there. This is looking down. If you can, it still exists today. You see this, what kind of looks like a square? That was the old Roman camp. And there's still, if you will, there's signatures of where it was during the 1st century, so some of that's been uncovered, and that's basically where the Romans hung out while they were attacking Israel. All right, then we go to a cave called En-Gedi. Remember what King David did with King Saul, David did with Saul at that point. King Saul basically is inside of the cave, and David in the still of the night walks over. He puts his life in danger. He cuts off part of the King Saul's robe. He takes it out of the cave, and in the morning he shouts out to Saul, does this look like something that might be from your garment, Saul? By the way, King David felt horrible about what he had done. He could have killed Saul, which of course he didn't want to do, but he kind of was upset because he wrecked the king's garment and got that close to him. But the bottom line is King David was loyal, even to Saul, when he was horrible to him. Qumran, how many of you have heard of the Dead Sea Scrolls? Of course, most, if not all. The Dead Sea Scrolls were found in this area known as Qumran, which is right off the Dead Sea, and it's really an unbelievable sight. All throughout the mountains that we're going to show you here, there are a massive amount of caves. Archaeologists have gone in there. In 1947, a little shepherd boy had a stone. He wings it into one of the caves. He hears something break. He goes in there and finds a piece of pottery, and inside the pottery are part of the Dead Sea Scrolls. So archaeologists and people from Israel Antiquities have been going into these mountains ever since. There's an individual that some of you know, Dr. Randall Price. He's an archaeologist. He's a good friend. He recently, in 2017, found another cave with more of the pots in it. But the biggest piece, the Isaiah scroll, was found there. Virtually every book of the Old Testament, there's transcripts there. The Essenes also found many other writings that are biblical in nature or have a biblical nexus, even though they're not scripture, that were written at that time. This is one of the most famous caves, which you're looking at down here. And if you get a close look, you can see a couple of 2x4s in there steadying that place so it doesn't collapse. But some of the scrolls were found in these caves in Qumran. So when you read about the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Isaiah Scrolls and all the other that have been found, this is the spot where that took place. Beautiful area. You can see the Dead Sea out in the back. And of course, if you go across the Dead Sea, what country is there? Jordan. Okay, so that's Jordan. If you look at the highest point over there, that is Mount Nebo. Who died on the top of Mount Nebo? Who? Moses. Why did Moses not come into the promised land? Because God told him, if you want water, ask me for it. And instead, Moses got ticked off. He hit the rock, and God said, because you were disobedient, you're not entering the promised land. So God took him on top of Mount Nebo, which you see there, and that's the place where he passed. All right, so bottom line, all these jars were found with scriptures in them and scrolls, and that happened at Qumran. and again, more caves and so forth. All right, very quickly, you go next place we go to, which is just about 5 miles away from Jerusalem. We went to the shepherd's fields. You can see the little sheep and so forth, commemorating that. We've often talked about the shepherd fields in Bethlehem, where what type of shepherds were there? The priestly shepherds. And they would go out into the shepherd's fields, and which are outside of this little penned-in area. You go out into where you see a little more of the land back there, and that's Jerusalem off in the distance. And the priestly shepherds would take care of those sacrificial lambs to be, and this is exactly the area where that took place. And again, a little bit bigger view of where the shepherd's fields were, where they would take care of those sheep, which would be slain, if you will, to place atonement for the sins of the people. All right, if I talk about Bethlehem, many of you know about this particular church that is there. And it's, again, there are Catholic churches, Russian Orthodox churches, Greek Orthodox churches on every place you go in Israel to commemorate them. This is the Church of the Nativity, which many times on Christmas you'll hear choir arrangements and so forth coming from this particular Catholic church. So it's beautiful. The acoustics are great. Of course, doctrinally we wouldn't be on the same page, but the beautiful building commemorates supposedly the place where Christ was born. Was Jesus born in Bethlehem? That's a given. Was he born in this particular spot? That's highly suspect, but of course, Helena, the mother of Constantine back in the 300s, she had come through Israel, and every place that she considered holy, they started to build cathedrals and basilicas and so forth over those alleged holy sites. So just a little bit of the interior of this place. All right, this is our tour group. We're going down into a little bit of a lower area, and this is supposedly, again, by no means am I saying I agree with it, this is supposedly the spot where the Lord Jesus literally was in the manger. So you go down these about 6, 7 stairs, and you see this particular plate, which has 14 parts of the star. That's supposedly the 14 representing the 14 generations talked about, and that is supposedly the place where Jesus was born. You watch those that are part of the denominational churches, they literally will come down, they'll get on their hands and their knees, they will kiss that star, and I did not kiss the star. But it's a good time to remember that, yes, Jesus was born in Bethlehem, regardless of whether it was at this specific site or not. You walk next door, and there's this beautiful church that exists there. There were some groups in there while we were there, and it's pretty and it's nice, but we'll just leave it at that. All right, then we did what many of the people like, went to one of these beautiful olive wood stores. That little piece of olive wood on the right there, I mean, it's as big as it looks. It's about $50,000, hand carved. I mean, it's exquisite artistry that they have with these olive wood, but the prices have gone astronomically high based on the lack of tourism. So they got to find the one wallet and hope they get in it, so to speak. But it is beautiful and it's well done. All right, we're going to leave the beautiful olive wood. We're going to start our trek up to Jerusalem. On the sides of the road as you go up to Jerusalem are these Bedouin villages, Bedouins. The Bedouins are Arab people. They're Muslim, and they live in what looks like these horrible, ugly shanty towns. Inside those ugly, horrible shanty towns are nice electronic appliances, modern-day TVs, and it looks horrible on the outside, but they're pretty nice on the inside, believe it or not. But they work in many of the stores and the fields and so forth. But this is what you see, and it looks like a horrible ghetto, but they literally enjoy living that. Every time we go up there, sometimes those encampments are moved. They'll go to different parts of the land there just to make sure that whatever they're doing, whether it's crops, whether it's animals and so forth, that they can sustain them. Again, when you're walking along the side of the road or driving, you'll come across a camel every now and then, which of course is kind of fun. All right, we get up to Jerusalem, Jerusalem. This is the center of God's universe. Ezekiel 5:5, as we read this morning, says that all nations surround Jerusalem. You can see the gold dome building in the middle of the picture. That is the Dome of the Rock, the Muslim shrine, where the Muslims believe that Muhammad ascended from this earth on a white horse named Barak, interesting, up to heaven. Of course, as Christians, we would not subscribe to that particular theology. Many people have asked me, and we'll be done by quarter after, many people have asked me, where will the next temple be built? Where will the third temple be built? It's like, will the temple be built on the side of the Dome of the Rock so they both can coexist? The answer is absolutely, positively, unequivocally, no. Underneath the Dome of the Rock is what's known as the foundation stone, or the top of Mount Moriah. Archaeologically speaking, that is where the first and the second temple stood. A little bit to the south of what you see as the Temple Mount is known as the City of David. You'll find many current video and YouTube video that they believe the temples were in the City of David. Folks, it's absolutely cannot have happened that's the place where the temples were. You say, why? Because the foundation stone, the top of Mount Moriah, the archaeological evidence, the first and the second temple periods, there's been a ton of archaeological artifacts taken out of the southern end of that Temple Mount from the first and second temple periods by the Muslims, thrown into the Kidron Valley like it was never there, but the archaeologists have proven that is the spot. Muslims for the most part are not, Jews for the most part up until recently have not been allowed to go up on the Temple Mount except to go on the furthest outskirts of it, and here is why. Opposite the foundation stone and the site of the what? Holy of Holies. In other words, the Jewish people were told stay off the mount because if you accidentally step on the Holy of Holies, it would be a horrible desecration. Well, again, there's no reason not to go there from our perspective. I've been there many times, and the Holy of Holies, again, is at the top of Mount Moriah. So, again, a little bit of a model at the Temple Institute of what the second temple would have looked like and what they have plans to build the third temple. The Temple Institute basically has everything ready to go. In other words, that third temple can be put up in an instant once they get permission to do so and the Dome of the Rock comes down. The big million-dollar question is, when is the Dome of the Rock going to come down, and how is it going to come down? And here is my strong, educated, very intelligent answer. I don't know. God didn't tell us. The only thing I do know is it's got to happen because God made it clear in Daniel chapter 9, verse 27, that the third temple has to come. Matthew chapter 24, verse 15 tells us that the abomination of desolation must take place in the third temple. Revelation chapter 11 tells us that the third temple was to be measured. And there's just so many different things that we know there's got to be a third temple. It's going to happen. The sacrifices will be reinstated for that first 3.5 years. The Antichrist will then come in, commit the abomination of desolation, Revelation 13, and that temple will be defiled. And Satan, Antichrist, and the false prophet will set up their one world government, one world religion, and one world economy in the last half of that 7-year tribulation period. This is probably my favorite place in all the world in Israel. If you looked up to the top, that will be the top of the Temple Mount. Does that kind of give you a hint that that's where a temple was? Yeah, it kind of does. Matthew chapter 24 and verse 2, Jesus takes his disciples out of the temple. They turn around and they look back at the temple, and the disciples say, Jesus, take a look at that temple. It's beautiful, it's gorgeous, it's marvelous, it's wonderful. And Jesus said, all right, men, let me tell you something. Not one stone will be left upon another that will not be cast down. In AD 70, 40 years after the crucifixion of Christ, The Romans went up to the top of the Temple Mount. They began to tear it apart. Vespasian, General Titus's father, said, I want you to go into Jerusalem. Rome has been destroyed. It's been burned down, and we need cash. So I want you to go in there, whatever you need to do, wipe out the Jewish people that are up on the Temple Mount. If you got to go to war with them, do what it takes. And then I want you to go up there, set the place on fire, burn off all the elements, get all the precious things that are in that Jewish temple, and bring them back to Rome so we can rebuild it. You see at the bottom of these streets? These are Herodian streets, meaning first century streets. You see those giant piles of rock? Okay, when we're talking about stones in the Bible, we're not talking about little stones like we use with gravel. We're talking about big giant boulders that were pushed over the side, fell down on that first century Herodian street, and many of them are sitting there today, 2,000 years later. Folks, did God fulfill his prophecy? You betcha he did. All right, we're getting close to the end here. So this is the Western Wall. Most of you are familiar with it. Again, up out where you see the Gold Dome building is where the first and the second temple stood. The Jewish people go down to the Western Wall, and many Gentiles do. And what are they praying for? The Jews are praying for the Messiah to come. Of course, they believe that Jesus was not the Messiah, so they're looking for God to come back and to do what? To set up his temple so that they can reinstate the sacrificial system and become pure once again. If you see, it's hard to see, but there's literally two sides there. Ladies are on the right, men are on the left. And if you see that ramp, which is right here, this is the ramp that you take. You walk up this ramp to get up to the Temple Mount. And you can still do that today, which we did. All right, so you'll see the Jewish men gathering around, getting their prayer books, and praying by the Western Wall. Very quickly, this is underneath the Temple Mount. You go down into the foundation where actually these massive foundation stones are. If you look at our, if you will, the part that sticks out from our baptistry, one end to the other, some of the stones that were used for the foundation of the temple are literally as big as that is. It was a miracle of engineering that were put together for that Temple Mount to be built when you're looking at those massive, massive stones that were put into place. This is a synagogue that was recently built inside that underneath the temple. It's just there because it's pretty. That's the only reason I'm showing it. Again, the Western Wall, where one day up on top that third temple will be built, and the fourth temple. These are the southern stairs of the Temple Mount in the old city. If you look out straight ahead, you see kind of a hill there. It's very hard to make out, but that is the Mount of Olives. So when you're talking about the Mount of Olives, the Kidron Valley, and the Temple Mount, they're literally 15-minute walk. You've done all three. So it's very close together. First time I went to Israel, it's like, wow, this stuff is really close together. I had this massive idea of how things were spread out. Everything is very, very close together. So there you see the group sitting on the southern stairs. Here's another picture out of order. That's a bunch of the stones on that first century Herodian street from the second temple. And again, I find that from especially a prophetic thing, it's just marvelous to see it. Here's one I wanted to show you. You see, these are, again, first century streets that those Herodian or the temple stones were cast over, and you can see the damage it did. By the way, all this was under dirt and was unearthed some years ago, and now we have the privilege of seeing that. All right, this is the Temple Institute, where all the things regarding the third temple have been, it's all there. Everything that they need to get the third temple instituted, if you will, is already in place. The garments are there. The various pieces for the inside of the temple are all there inside this building and other places hidden where they can't be destroyed. Just some of the things that are ready, the trumpets, the harps, all that stuff. I mean, it is all there. They are ready. As soon as that Dome of the Rock comes down, the altar will be put up, and then the third temple will be built. All the pieces are there and ready to go. If you look here, which is a wonderful picture, and it's just amazing it hasn't been destroyed. This is a newer Jewish synagogue. You see that menorah in that encapsulated tube? That's 1,000 pounds worth of gold sitting there. That is the menorah that will be placed in the third temple. It's ready, and it's beautiful, and you can have your picture taken with it. Okay, this one was for fun. Right across the plaza, I saw this sign, "Make Gaza Jewish Again." That's just for a little humor. But you think the Jewish people think it's funny? No. I mean, they're dead serious. All right, so again, a picture of Jerusalem. This is the old city walls. If you see the little bit of structure that's sticking up, this is what's known right here as the Eastern Gate. Now, we know that when Jesus returns, he will come through, if you will, the Eastern Gate. Will it be that one, or will it be the rebuilt one? By the way, that is not the original Eastern Gate. Part of it is still down in the ground. This was built by Suleiman the Magnificent. Most of that had come down and been rebuilt. Let's see. You can barely make him out, but that's Dr. Tillotson down there. Took a picture of him as he was speaking. All right. Where he was at is the Garden of Gethsemane. The Garden of Gethsemane, it's a beautiful place. There are olive trees, and you can see the word peace there, that have been there for almost 1,000 years in the Garden of Gethsemane. And as always, there is a Catholic church that's sitting in the Garden of Gethsemane, and there it is. We're going to skip that because of time. But again, the Dome of the Rock currently sits where that third temple will indeed be. This, by the way, is a very, 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 very unusual picture. You say, why is that? Because there's nobody in it. We were a handful of people, and normally this place would have hundreds and hundreds of people on it, many Muslims, many Jews, many Gentiles, tour groups coming through here. But folks, 2 days later, nobody would be up on that mount because of the war that would begin. All right, very close by is what's known as the Pool of Bethesda, where healings took place. This is the remains of that. Tour groups come again and see it. There's a beautiful church called St. Anne's there. The acoustics are the best in the world. So we got our tour group together. We sang a song, and everybody sounded good, which is very unusual. All right, 2 more sets and we're done. This is what's known as the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. There are 2 main spots that are picked out as the probable places where Jesus was buried. This is, again, a Catholic memorial, if you will, called the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. It's absolutely gorgeous, and it's massive. It looks like the entrance is just this simple little basic thing, but boy, you walk through that entrance, and all of a sudden these big giant rooms open up with all these beautiful things within it. If you look down where you see what looks to be a stone, and you see someone kneeling before it, that's where they believe the body of Jesus actually laid. Of course, that's far-fetched from probably the truth, but they come and do the same thing they do in Bethlehem. The believers, specifically mainly the Roman Catholic folks, will come in. They will kiss that platform, believing that's where Jesus was. They'll take handkerchiefs and other things, lay them on there, and to take them home as a souvenir, of course, of where they believe Jesus was. This is what's known as the Holy Sepulchre. This is where they believe Jesus literally was buried at this spot. You never see it this empty. I was able to go in there. It's a very, very teeny tiny little place where they say Jesus was buried. I mean, it's nothing more than a little hole inside of this sepulcher, if you will, or this alleged sepulcher. All right. This is the other place that many believe where that Jesus was potentially buried. Even the tour guides there are now saying, well, probably not. This is what's known as the Garden Tomb. Some of you might have been there. You see the opening at the bottom. That is the tomb entrance. If you go inside the tomb, this is what you will see. and basically nothing more than a concrete slab whereby it is stated Jesus may have been placed in there, and therefore it has become a major site for God's people to come to. And again, just a little bit different angle of where some believe that Jesus was. All right, we ended up our tour as we always do. Dr. Tillotson and a few others were leading us, and after you go through the garden tomb, it's customary to get your group together and have communion together as you end out the tour, which is exactly what we did. All right, you've gotten a little teeny tiny taste of what happens if and when you go to Israel, the sites that you're going to see. The sites that we brought out here are the major ones that most tour groups go to. There's a lot more you can go to, and we call those the advanced tours. Last thing, and again, I'm not selling tours. I don't even have a tour lined up at this point, but I strongly think that based on the current conditions in Israel, that in 2027 is probably going to be one of the most peaceful times that we've seen in Israel in a long time, if indeed Iran is neutralized and the other countries that have signed on are basically neutralized. So someone texted me and it's like, what does it usually cost to go to Israel? Well, the cheapest tour is usually around $3,500, and they go up to $4,000, maybe a little bit higher, based on how long you stay there and the accommodations and so forth. So if it's something you're interested in, whether with a group that I'm involved in or not, plan on a minimum of about $3,500 to go there for about a 12-day tour, and then it goes up from there. Probably $5,000 is about as high as they ever get, but it does take a few shekels, if you will, to go there. So if you're interested, just something to think about and to prepare for. Well, thanks for your patience. I know I went a bit over, which is nothing new. And let's pray and get you underway. Father, thank you for your love for us. Thanks for these dear folks that came out tonight to see a little bit about what is happening in Israel and some of the things that we've been fortunate enough to see and to experience. And Lord, I pray, Lord, for the peace of Israel. You've asked us to pray for Jerusalem and their peace. And Father, we continue to do that. So Lord, would you continue to bring peace to our Jewish friends in Israel? Would you please bring this war to a decisive and quick end? And then, Lord, while those of us that love you and love Israel and love the Jewish people sojourn down here, if you determine to open up the doors, that we once again may have the privilege of going to your precious land and seeing many of the things that have taken place over the centuries and over the millennia. We look forward to that as well. Now, Lord, we thank you for Jesus, who came down from heaven, died on the cross for our sins, was buried, and 3 days later rose from the dead. These sites that we went to, even though we didn't have time to go through all the specifics, is exactly the place where Jesus came down, he ministered, and gave his life for our sins. So, Father, I pray that anyone that's listening, if they've never placed their faith in Jesus, that they would consider doing that. Thank you for that beautiful verse that reminds us that you loved this world, that God so loved the world, that he gave his only begotten Son, Jesus Christ, that whosoever believes in him and his death, burial, and resurrection should not perish or go to hell, but have everlasting life. Thank you for your wonderful land. Thank you for the scriptures. Thank you for the history books, which help us to remember the wonderful things you've accomplished. And now I pray that you dismiss us with your blessing as we go back into the battlefield. Would you protect us? Would you help us to stay strong? And would you help us to keep sharing the gospel with all who will listen? And we'll give you the praise, the honor, and the glory. And all God's people said, amen.